This is TV Podcast Industries, where we're talking about The Witcher, episodes 1 to 4. Welcome to 2020, fellow Witchers. This is TV Podcast Industries, and we're watching The Witchers, episode 1 to 4. I am one of your hosts, Chris, and I am joined by two fellow Witchers, the men of the coin, monster hunters extraordinaire. Boys, introduce yourselves to our fellow Witchers.
Hello there, fellow Witchers. I am one of your hosts, John.
I'm one of your hosts, Derek. Yes, from Watchers on Watchmen to Witchers on The Witcher. I like it.
Yes. There's a symmetry about it.
There is, yeah.
Yes, very soon we're going to be doing the Wellingtons, the Weight Watchers. I'm pretty sure, like, any other W's we can figure out over time.
Well, as it's January, I'm definitely going to need to do the Weight Watchers, to be honest.
Absolutely. And I am, of course, filled with man flu, so apologies for the heavy nasal version of my voice.
That's all right, John. We're used to it.
I know. This has been like constant battle since about December.
I know. But don't worry, it'll go pretty soon. Fellow Witchers, we're here with The Witcher. We did want to record this when the show came out on the 20th of December last year, but as you probably know, if you've been following us in TV Podcast Industries, we were covering The Watchmen almost up until Christmas. And then we went off and had a break for a couple of weeks. So we didn't get the chance to do The Witcher back then. What we're doing with this episode is we're going to split The Witcher into two parts, episodes 1 to 4 and episodes 5 to 8. Part of the reason for that was time, as I mentioned. The other reason, if you've watched the episodes, the other reason is it only starts to really make sense as a series by episode 4, I think. And it gives you a big kind of overview of the show by looking at episode 4 back through to episode 1. I think it helps with the way the show's structured.
Yeah, definitely. Me was confused, for sure. But I think, it starts to at least make a little more sense, and certainly you get an idea of timelines a bit better by episode 4. And just to put it out there, I have not read the books and I have not played the video game. So coming to this fantasy world absolutely afresh, and you know, just off the top bat, even though I didn't understand it, even though I was trying to learn all these names, all these people, wondering when sort of the three main arcs were going to come together, it was very intriguing. So it certainly kept my interest, even though it was only really in episode 4 where things started maybe to gel a bit in my own mind.
And that's a really good point to throw it over to you, Chris, because I know you're the fan of The Witcher. You're the one that's been asking to do this show, really. So what's your experience of The Witcher?
So I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this a lot. I think you're both really correct. By episode 4, it is starting to make sense. My history with The Witcher is I started on the video games.
Okay.
So I was first introduced via CD Projekt Red. And then by the end of The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, which is one of the biggest games, it's almost Skyrim level. It's a 100+ hour game where the side quests are sometimes better than the main story. It's a action RPG. It is across every platform. It is very cheap and it is very worthwhile the money. I got into that. I went back and played 2 after playing 3.
Okay.
And then actually went, I really enjoy this, and I went into the books.
Right.
First, actually going into the graphic novels, checking out the actual Image comics.
Oh, right.
Which are very reminiscent of, even the art style is reminiscent of Hellboy, Mike Mignola. So the art style is that kind of square jaw, kind of Hellboy, kind of the bureau, paranormal investigation kind of style. but set in the Witcher universe.
So truly multimedia, really, for The Witcher. As far as I was aware, honestly, I only ever heard of the books and then of the games, and I've never played the games. I've been criticized for that by one of my best friends the other day, going, how could you not have played these games? I'm a big gamer, as some of our listeners will know. I've mentioned it quite a few times on here, but we've never played The Witcher. It's on PS4 right now for 15 quid for the Game of the Year edition, which is apparently the one that has everything in it for 15 quid for a week. So, we picked it up yesterday. We've downloaded it. We will probably be playing it after we finish the podcast. As you mentioned there, Chris, it's made by the company CG Projekt Red, who are the developers of the game and probably a very well-known developer to anybody who is a gamer. But I suppose, importantly here, before we go into any spoilers for the show, it is episodes 1 to 4 that we're covering. We're not going to spoil anything in the future because, well, none of us have seen episodes 5 to 8. But we will be spoiling from here on out. We will be spoiling everything up to episode 4. So if you haven't watched up to episode 4, make sure you head off, watch the 4 episodes and come back. I will say some of the initial criticisms I probably had of the episodes when I was watching it first kind of were resolved by episode 4. And I think that's acceptable when you have a show that's all dropped when 8 episodes come out in one day. It's kind of acceptable to say, right, you're not going to get all your questions answered in episode 1. By the end of the 8 episodes, if you watch them that way, you'll see our full story, I suppose. So I did have some criticisms as the first episode came out. I kind of went, oh, this looks like a standard fantasy show. And then after a couple of episodes, I think it kind of settled into its groove, I suppose, my initial take. What's your initial take on it, John?
My initial take on it is that it, I've really enjoyed it. I think it's been really intriguing. It was, my main thing was just trying to understand how all these people related to one another, because I think they're fairly distinct in the first 4 episodes. Obviously, there's not much crossover. And then by episode 4, you get at least two of the parties coming together, and you realize it's at a different time. And I think that the one thing I read about that is that the books follow Geralt. It's from his point of view always. So in order to get these 3 main characters from the books, both Geralt, also Ciri, the young princess, and Yennefer, the mage, they had to bring their different storylines into these first 4 episodes. Right. And so, whilst all the character timelines are chronological, from what I understood from the piece that I read, I think it was in Variety, because I wanted to understand the timelines after episode 4. They are not chronological on the screen. They are happening at different times as we see them from episode 1 through to episode 4, as we are introduced to Yennefer, Ciri, and Geralt. So, but I've really enjoyed it. And I think as well with fantasy novels, your world building, and you have to build that world. And I know there's been some criticism around some of that world building, but again, I think a bit like you, Derek, certainly by episode 4, I felt that there were some really good elements that were coming out, and plus I think it looks fantastic, dare I say it, magical, and it's certainly the fight sequences that we've seen and the locations have been just really, really good.
And last one before we kick into it, Chris, what's your anything else you want to add to the initial impact of the show or the initial setup of the show?
Yeah, I think it's been given a bit of I think The Witcher has faced a slight backlash from Game of Thrones, the last season.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people have felt burned. You either agree or disagree with that.
I disagree.
The last season. And I think there is now a slight fantasy world. Hatred's too strong a word. Wariness. Wariness is probably, I think, is the key. Right. Because this does remind me of season 1 of, so far, reminds me of season 1 of Game of Thrones.
Oh, really?
Because you're thrown into a world with a lot of not given you're not given a lot of answers. You're not given a lot of backstory within the first couple of episodes.
Right.
I am assuming we'll have a lot more backstory by the end of the season 1. We know there has been a season 2 agreed, and it's in pre-production already.
Yeah, filming started yesterday, apparently, according to Henry Cavill.
Yeah.
I do think it's a bit of an uphill struggle, isn't it, with Game of Thrones, because it was the biggest show in the entire world. Even to the end, to the final season, people watched it up until the end, obviously, and you always will lose people, and people will be for and against it by the end of the season of that show. But it is a massive uphill battle. If you think back to season 1 of that show, it dropped to very little kind of response and then started getting picked up by people. The budget was very low. It was very much focused on people talking in rooms, talking about the world. And by season 3, the budget was massive on that show. The kind of battles they were doing was huge. So anybody that's trying to jump in and be the next Game of Thrones, which everybody seems to be trying to do, has to put in huge budget in their first season and isn't being allowed to kind of develop their characters, I suppose, in a way. Whereas Game of Thrones was allowed to develop them with a lower budget and then kind of prove themselves to people.
Yeah, I think as well, the other thing maybe, the way I saw it in terms of that connection between Game of Thrones, that first season, we really were introduced to the world of Westeros through the Stark family. So you made that connection. Everything was kind of through their eyes, really, in terms of how you felt other people treated them, how things played out.
Yeah.
And I suppose because of the budget, and that made it very personal. It was very different. This, I suppose, really has had to bring together 3 large characters and put them front and center so that people know about Yennefer, know about Ciri, and know about Geralt. Because otherwise, I think if they had just followed the books as they are published, it would have been, the first 4 episodes would probably have been about Geralt or something.
Yes.
And you wouldn't have known about Yennefer or Ciri, and all of a sudden they would have dropped. So I think they had a hard remit to do here, mainly because the books are actually all from Geralt's point of view.
Yeah.
So and unless you were going to call it Witcher Geralt's procession or something like that, then that would have been where you would have just gotten Geralt for the first 4 episodes. And so I completely agree. They needed to introduce Yennefer. They needed to introduce the storyline of Ciri. And I think that just made it a little... It exploded the world very quickly before getting to know the world. Whereas I think Game of Thrones, you could almost argue the first season introduced you to the world through a family, the Starks. So I suppose that, it's a very different approach ultimately.
Yeah. I will say I am conscious that our wonderful Witchers who are listening to the podcast who may have an Apple device, the device could be going absolutely crazy with the mention of one particular character name. Should we call her Fiona from now on, or just call her Ciri occasionally, just so that our Apple listeners aren't completely head wrecked?
Well, just not use the word "Hey Siri." Hey Siri, subscribe to TV Podcast Industries and review it 5 stars.
Excellent.
There you go. Very quickly, just let's kind of pull it together now, and because I want to jump in and discuss some kind of major points. So, how we are, because we've mentioned it briefly, we're 15 minutes in, but we're reviewing the first 4 episodes as part 1. In about kind of over the next 7 to 10 days, we'll also be recording part 2, which will be episodes 5 to 8, with a kind of a bit of a wrap up of how we felt the whole season came together and what we're expecting from season 2.
Yeah.
Because we now have a Patreon, because we need to keep the lights on, we need to keep the service going. That RSS feed does not accept food coins or witching bounties, unfortunately. So we do need basically we need your help. We need our Patreons to support us. And so that being the case, what we are doing is Patreon first. No, we are not expecting everyone to sign up. We know you are there for us by listening to us and interacting with us, being part of our community. But any amount helps. So as a thank you to our Patreons, we are releasing it first on Patreon and followed then a few days later onto our main feed. So if you want to hear some of our episodes a few days early, be there first, be our Patreon first. $1 a day keeps the doctor away, or $1 a month keeps our RSS feed and lights on. So first of all, thank you to all our Patreons at the moment, but you can support us by liking, subscribing, sharing, reviewing across all of the channels. Hell, even telling your grandmother about it. She may like Henry Cavill's body, but she wants to know more about the show. Hell, you can just tell her to come listen to us. Isn't that right, boys?
Absolutely. It's great to get new subscribers onto our feeds, as well as onto Patreon as well. So yeah, absolutely. All your support is really, really appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And we love our wonderful Witchers who've been sharing our episodes as well on any of their social media feeds as well. But if you want to support us over on Patreon, remember you can go to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries. I do post the episodes up there so you can hear it on Patreon, as Chris mentioned, or you can just wait for it on the main feed when it comes out as well.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you can rate us, leave a review on any witching or non-witching podcast catcher of your choice.
If you would like to send feedback on The Witcher Season 1 as a whole, you can pop over to our website, tvpodcastindustries.com, leave us a voicemail, and you will basically play it out on the part 2 of our Witcher in review. Or you can send us email to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com and we'll do it there. Don't forget as well, we always post up spoiler posts on our group over on facebook.com/group/TV Podcast Industries. So we've had quite an interactive group there right now where people are discussing season 1, or at least the first 4 episodes of The Witcher. So make sure you join us over there as well and post your thoughts, and we'll discuss more of them at the end of part 2. So gentlemen, we very quickly discussed our history with The Witcher. So we're going to jump into some episode details. Derek, do you want to take away with the writing and directors for these first 4 episodes?
Absolutely, yes. These are all based on the books by Andrzej Sapkowski. The books were the main inspiration for the show. They have not taken anything from the games. Obviously, the games are based off the books as well. But Lauren Schmidt, who's the showrunner for the show, she has based it all on the books and reordered them there. So if you want to know more about the characters, it's definitely the books that you would probably go back to. Lauren Schmidt, the showrunner, we've talked about her many times before on the podcast because she was heavily involved in Daredevil and some of the other Defenders shows that we have covered on Defenders TV Podcast and TV Podcast Industries over the last 5 years. She wrote 5 episodes of the Defenders TV show. There was only 8 on there. So,
yeah,
so that's
exactly.
quite a significant contribution to that show. And she also wrote 3 episodes of season 2 of Daredevil as well. She has been involved in the Umbrella Academy, which we talked about a little bit on our 2019 recap episode a couple of weeks ago. So she's been heavily involved in lots of shows that we've been covering, and getting the role as showrunner for this massive series, quite a big jump.
Yeah, definitely. Really pleased for her, actually. And it's good to see friends from other shows being rewarded with such a big property, with huge expectation.
Absolutely. She's also the writer for the first episode of the series. And obviously, as showrunner of the show, she has been sitting in with every other episode as well and giving her guidance to everybody else. But she gets the main credit for the writing of the first episode. The director for the first episode is Alik Sakharov. He directed 3 episodes of this series. He is a cinematographer and director known for Game of Thrones, Ozark, and House of Cards. So definitely worked in the big studios with Netflix and HBO before. And it's nice to know that somebody's coming over from the Game of Thrones world to add their directing style into The Witcher as well.
Yeah. For me, I'm really happy with the choice of the writer. Or Lauren, for example, is fantastic. Mm-hmm. She earned her bona fides with the West Wing and the Justice in terms of characters. She really has shown Netflix, in my opinion, that she can deliver on these shows. And now working up to where she is now, which is The Witcher season 1 and season 2, and really pulling in the character development from with some of that supernatural as well is really great. Alik, for example, I'm so happy he came in on episode 1 too, because as I said, pulling that inspiration from Game of Thrones is needed, but at the same point, the House of Cards, the West Wing, kind of between him and Lauren, pulling in for that political intrigue that we will be getting kind of throughout the season.
Absolutely. I will give a high recommendation to following Lauren Schmidt over on Twitter as well. She's very, very funny about her idea of creating The Witcher, because she's a big, big fan, and she basically just sat in a cabin for a couple of months trying to break the story into something that she could deliver to Netflix before she went to the writer's room. And she's very interested talking about working with the writers. She will she has at least answered a bunch of questions from, I guess, fans and people who have critiques about The Witcher. She's been very open about the reasons she made particular decisions for the series that are different to the books and different to the games. So she's fascinating to follow on Twitter. Definitely go and check her out. John,
Yes.
do you want to give us a quick overview of the first episode of the show, The End's Beginning?
Sure. Hostile townsfolk and a cunning mage greet Geralt in the town of Blaviken. Ciri finds her royal world upended when Nilfgaard sets its sights on Cintra.
A massive opener episode, really, because as you said earlier on, John, this is about really introducing loads of different characters and species and loads of different factions within this world. And I'm really not surprised by anybody who said they got to the end of the episode and went, what? What's going on here? I like the fights, but I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, I thought there were great visuals in this episode, you know, in terms of the city, the palace of Cintra, and the attack by Nilfgaard, plus the whole thing in Blaviken as well. That kind of really washed out sort of, you know, you do get the sense of rain, mud, and it being fairly grey in Blaviken. Really nice visuals here.
Mm-hmm.
I was so happy at how they did this, like the opening shots with Geralt fighting the monster really gives you an understanding of what this world is. But at the same time, it plows you with information. Like, and sometimes not in a good way. Mm-hmm. My wife literally turned around to me and went, huh? What? Yeah. What was that word? Like, literally Blaviken, Nilfgaard, Cintra, like, they're not like Westeros, where they're kind of everyone's used to those words now. This is we're back to the beginning where everyone's like, Nilfgaard? What the? And
I don't really know whether that's a bad complaint that I don't know what's going on after the first 60 minutes of a show, you know?
Absolutely.
There's 8 episodes there, check them all out, I suppose. You're not supposed to know everything, but I think they are laying out a few things that you should be able to cling on to. You know, one faction is against the other and one faction's just burnt down an entire city and killed everybody in it. So, you know, there's a big battle here and you'll learn more as the episodes go on. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so let's get into our big moment for episode 1. We'll go through each episode and we'll just pull out our big moment. I suspect there might be certainly some crossover between our big points here. Mm-hmm. And as we move on to each episode, I will come in with the summary, just so you know where we're up to within the overall storyline of this series so far.
Exactly.
So, Chris, you are the Witcher Magusta. So, what's your big point for episode 1?
This.
Yeah.
One of my big points probably for episode 1 and continuing throughout the season of the first half that we've seen is the fighting, the sword work. It's really well put together. It's really the stunt coordination, the whole lot for me was just amazing. Particularly in this first episode. This first episode really sets the scene with the grace that Geralt, which you wouldn't expect. So someone as bulky and big and schwal as Henry Cavill, you don't expect him to move with that kind of grace with a sword. You expect a bit more of a bruiser, that kind of Hulk smash type approach. Yeah. But this for me was amazing because we see him fight with the bad people of Blaviken, where he actually gets his name from the book, and this is like the history of how he got the name Butcher of Blaviken, because he did take down the guts of about 12 people.
Yes.
In a graceful art. And that's very much one style of how he fights, and he used, like, it's just fantastic. But then it very much quickly switches when he starts fighting with Renfrey. To becoming a much more someone on his someone who's at least with similar abilities and this kind of competency as him.
Yeah.
With a sword.
It felt like each of them were kind of holding back against each other when he was fighting with Renfrey. She didn't want to kill him, but would, and he didn't want to kill her, but would. And you can really tell that they are matched. It's a really, really good scene. You're absolutely right, Chris. This is one of the biggest things that this show has going for it. But the amount of work they've put in to these fight sequences. There's a great moment just before that battle with Renfrey's men in Blaviken. There's a great moment where he just takes a breath before plunging into the fight, stabbing the guy in the face with his sword and then cracking his head open. When you're suddenly going, whoa, now I'm in a battle here. Now I'm in a real moment. And I will say this was definitely the first moment where I went, I want to buy this game. I want to have that moment where I put a shield up and block the guys from coming towards me and then attack the other three around me, you know? It's that moment where you realize this also does have connections to a video game, you know?
Yeah, it was a great fight sequence. I think Henry Cavill's excellent here. I just love how he dispatches those 12 guys who are coming at him. And of course, I think earlier on in the episode, you do have, that they're baiting him as well. So it really does feel like he is making a very sharp point, generally in their heads or through their guts. But I really like how, he does that. And of course, to top it all off, or decapitate it all off, the leader who really was baiting him in the inn at the start, gets his head chopped off after being, I think, pinned to the door. But yeah, it's just how he dispatches them is like really good. And you do feel that is taking its inspiration, probably from the game. I don't know how it's described in the book, some of these fight sequences, but yeah, as you say, Chris, it just kind of, it flowed, and moved through all these 12 guys as he attacks them, where he has the far superior sort of, battle poise and skill set there, really good. And then, just having that change, with, Renfrey, is really nice. And, I thought this was really good.
It was almost a dance between the two of them. Yeah, it was really cool. And also starting that whole fight with him knocking an arrow coming towards him out of the air with his sword, you go, whoa, this is going to be cool. And they didn't disappoint. Yeah, really, really good.
It reminds me to a degree of the hallway scene in Daredevil season 1.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
In that it was very brutal, but at the same time, graceful.
Yeah, graceful. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good word, yeah.
It's a nice way, as you said, Derek, like as soon as first time viewers, first time people kind of to the source material, to the Witcher universe, it's once you're introduced and you see that, you're like, oh, okay, now I know what I'm in for now.
Yeah.
You know it's not going to be I don't know. So there's 2 other shows coming out which are going to be similar high fantasy. You've got the Wheel of Time coming to Amazon.
It's Robert Jordan's series, isn't it?
Robert Jordan's, which is very, again, high fantasy. One of my favorite books of all time. Will be covering it.
Maybe.
Maybe, fingers crossed, if and when it ever comes out. But at the same time, you've also got Lord of the Rings. Those 2, I believe, will not be as violent, if you will.
Yeah.
They're not going to have that same level of Witcher and Game of Thrones where you get blood, you get guts, you get the Red Wedding.
Yeah.
This will.
Maybe.
And I think that's what they did in this kind of opening shot, this sequence. Even when you have with like Geralt fighting the Kikimora, the monster, as I said, like literally him like jumping out of the swamp and basically bisecting its kind of art, or decapitating its arm off and then spearing it through the head.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the other thing. The monster fight right as an opener is just really good. It gives that atmosphere, doesn't it? It's kind of this dank swamp, dark forest. Dare I say it, even Bambi gets killed or put down by Geralt. Yeah, no, exactly. You're not having a good day. I think we do see him eating the venison as well, doesn't he? He is cooking it up when he's in the forest, I think, with Renfrey later on.
And I do want to point out, the second time I watched the episode, I did notice that the deer had been injured.
Yes.
So Geralt was going you're not having a good day because he's been injured and he's also going to kill him. First time I watched it, I was like, that's really cruel to show the opener with the poor little deer there about to be attacked. He gets away and then gets killed by Geralt. But there's a slight little touch to it that Geralt does see that he's injured and kills him.
Absolutely. I think the other thing as well, for me, as this jump off point, you do get that, you know, it introduces him as a witcher, that this is a group of people who are apart. He's doing this for coin. He's like a hired assassin to kill monsters. He has certain abilities, powers above normal humans in this. And I kind of like that. And I like the fact that you do get that sense of him, set apart from at least the humans in terms of how they view him. And certainly when you see him in Blaviken, where, you know, he is slightly observed with mistrust, with this idea, like you get in the Lord of the Rings, where they are special folk who are loners, do things differently, not entirely trusted, but if someone has got a problem, no one else can help with a monster, then you get the G team of Geralt to come in and sort that out. So I thought that opening was really good, and how that all kind of gave a hint as to his place in this world as well.
Yeah. Was that your big point for the first episode, John, or did you have something else?
No, I had something else. It's kind of at the end of the fight that Chris brought out, and it's ultimately Geralt meeting Stregobor, the mage, and you kind of get this element of a prophecy that someone, a lady is coming to kill him, and he believes that it's Renfrey, and it could be someone else. That this woman is born of the evil in this world. And he is being asked effectively, again, he's being hired to be an assassin, but this time to protect himself, Stregobor, from this woman. And we're introduced to Renfrey here, who, you know, has a vendetta against him because of how her life has played out. But it's right at the end here where Stregobor, you know, seems to whip up the crowd against the Witcher, but also poses the question, have you done the right thing? Have you killed the right person? In the sense that, you know, the Witcher, again, I kind of liked how Henry Cavill played this, where, you know, he didn't want to kill Renfrey. And he didn't really want to be employed by Stregobor to do his kind of dirty work, really. But ultimately, the way the battle plays out between these two, because she goes for him after sort of a bit of a stand down, he does kill her because she's trying to kill him. And you get Stregobor saying, you know, have you chosen the right woman to kill? Even though Geralt didn't want to kill Renfrey. And this prophecy then, I suppose, is a bigger thing. Maybe it's just around him. And I think we maybe get hints of that in some of the episodes later on, when we get to see the Citadel of the Gull, with all the mages there. But certainly Stregobor seems to be someone that I don't know whether I fully trust him. He seems quite manipulative. So I kind of like this introduction of him with Geralt and with Renfrey as well. Definitely. And the fact that ultimately Geralt was forced into doing something he didn't want to do for someone who he didn't really care much for, and didn't really want to work for him or receive his coins. So, and then you get Stregobor really seemingly trying to turn Blaviken against him, and he probably is the one, I don't know, who propagates the Butcher of Blaviken as well. So I thought that was a really nice part of this episode as well.
Well, between the two of you, you've pretty much chosen the two major things I wanted to talk about in the episode as well, because I do think this relationship between Stregobor and Witcher at the beginning and Geralt at the beginning is the most interesting part of that first episode. The line he actually says to Geralt at the end of the episode is, you made a choice to kill Renfrey and you'll never know whether it was the right choice, which is a real punishment to him because it feels throughout the episode that he's fallen in love with this woman, who she describes herself as, they created me like they created you. We're not that different.
Yeah.
I was created to be this. You were created to be what you are. And of course, I'm going to do everything I can to fulfill my destiny, almost is her attitude. And he agrees with that. He sees that in her and doesn't want to kill her, and then makes the decision to have it kind of thrown in his face by Stregobor at the end of the episode. Does feel like it's going to be a punishment for the Witcher going forward, always, which I just thought was a very interesting idea. One other thing that I will pull out from the episode as well, because we haven't really talked about it, and it is a massive part of the episode, is the battle between Nilfgaard and the Cintrans. That battle is fantastic. We've mentioned Game of Thrones a few times. I don't think we're going to stop mentioning Game of Thrones throughout the episode, but this is a battle that would have been saved to the third season of Game of Thrones. Seeing two armies going head to head on a field of battle is something that you didn't see in early seasons because they couldn't afford it, basically. Whereas in this show, it's in the middle of the first episode. I think it's 15, 20 minutes into the episode where we see this fantastic battle and see that everybody there is a warrior. I love the warrior queen. I love the idea that she's able to come out in the battlefield and completely hold her own in front of everybody else. And they're having great conversations, herself and her king, where he's telling her we need to win this battle just before he gets an arrow through the head, killing him instantly.
Oh yeah, that was very Harold, Battle of Hastings, 1066 and all that. I thought that was really cool, actually.
Very good, very good. A little historical reference that I probably don't know because I didn't learn a huge about Hastings.
I like the fact that the queen is called the Lioness as well, I think. Mm-hmm. That's a nice kind of moment. I like this queen, dare I say it, she got spunk.
Yeah, she does, definitely. And I love the concept. I love the whole idea that when they lose the battle, everybody in the castle takes poison to kill themselves off rather than being taken by the opposing army. I think that's quite an interesting idea. Even though they are a warrior race that wants to save themselves, they do realize when all is lost, it's time to take your tablets and go, basically.
Well, and she does a Prince Tommen, doesn't she, and chucks herself out the window. Mm-hmm. I mean, the thing is,
it's a really dramatic way to go. Yes,
it really is. Although it seemed less funny than Tommen. But. Sure. I think as well, I was still not fully sure around Cintra and the people inhabiting it. That was something because you're dropped into this huge battle, these forces of Nilfgaard, and the reasoning for it wasn't entirely sure. I think but. Here as well, we're introduced to Princess Ciri, who is escaping here, from the forces of Nilfgaard and the Black Rider, I suppose, the leader of the Nilfgaardian, forces.
Hunter, basically.
Yeah, I mean, again, still surrounded in mystery for me. I think even after episode 4, I'm not entirely clear who he is. I wasn't even sure whether these were, after a few of the episodes, whether the Nilfgaards were Elvish in some way, but I think here, and the interesting thing is that Princess Ciri is what we feel is being haunted. She is being told to escape by the Queen, and you have that moment right at the end where we see she has a particular power, almost like a banshee, with the scream, being able to sort of split the earth, so she is able to escape from the leader of the Nilfgaardian forces.
Yeah, exactly. Really, really cool to see this type of character in the show, and really cool to see how this is going to develop. We will say it now, I love that by the time you get to episode 4, we understand a lot more about this battle between the Elvish and the humans, the distaste the humans have had for the elves and the things that they've done to punish them over the years. And you can kind of see now, after the 4th episode, why there was this attack. I think that's something that I really liked the build up to, because we're getting the different timelines coming together by about episode 4.
But didn't you think that there was something strange when she did split the earth as well, when she was being chased by the leader of the Nilfgaardians?
Yeah, there was in a later moment where the Elvish assassin that's going after Ciri almost gets her, and she cracks the earth in half. And he looks at her as if he's saying to her, no, don't run away. I'm here to help you, or I'm here to save you. He looks at her not as if she's gotten away from his grasp, as if he's there to try and save her. But I'm interested to see if that maybe plays out in the future of the show. I don't know at the moment. It feels like it could be a straight black and white story. He's after her. He wants to catch her. And she got away. But it was just something in his look that made me think, oh, maybe there's something different.
Yeah, so there could be something there that maybe is a little different. Certainly, because I'm just wondering, we find out later that Ciri does speak Eldrin. So maybe she's part elf as well. Perhaps, or something. Yeah. I don't know. But I'm sure Chris does, but don't spoil us, Chris.
That's what I'm like. I'm sitting here in silence, and I know probably some of our fellow Witchers are sitting in silence as well, or screaming at the podcast. I know some of this, and I want to correct you, but at the same point, I don't. Because that's the whole fun part of this.
Yeah, correct us if it's something in the show itself. Like what we do know by episode 4, we know her mother had the same power. We know her great-grandmother had the same power, but we know the queen doesn't have the power. It skipped her generation. But her mother had the Banshee power, and her great-grandmother had the Banshee power, like Ciri has. But we don't know where that power came from. We know who her parents are as well. We know by episode 4. But again, we're kind of moving into other episodes. So let's do that. Let's move into other episodes. I have one final thing, a question, I suppose, in episode 1. Chris, you might know this might be a game-related thing or maybe a book-related thing. Geralt talking to his horse seems like a very specific thing. It seems like something that may be a regular feature of the books, that he tells his stories and tales to his horse. He seems very connected to the horse for this episode. Is there something in that I'm missing? Because I don't know whether it comes up more in the show, but he seems very attached to this specific horse and seems to tell him a lot of his tales. Is that something that you've seen in the games or the books?
So, Roach is his best friend. Roach is the name of the horse. It is his best friend. It is his confidant. Right. He talks to it a lot in the books. Although the story that he tells Roach about killing his first monster, the rapist, is actually from the books, but he doesn't tell Roach in the books. He tells a priestess.
Oh, okay.
So it's just, they've taken 2 parts, one of him telling that story and him having the kind of his confidant with Roach and kind of blended them together. Roach is a big part of the games as well. Right.
What a great confidant. It can't talk back to you. It can just neigh at you.
yeah, exactly. Although Roach is supposed to be quite smart.
Right.
But it's not, he's not a super horse or anything. He's just a smart horse. I will correct you on one very small thing. Okay. Nilfgaardians are humans.
Okay, grand.
Oh.
That's what they are.
No, that's what I wasn't sure on in the first
So I've completely
episode.
got that wrong then. Okay.
I think in the first episode, I assumed that they were human. And certainly then moving through, I was getting confused as to whether they were human or elven, because Cintra seems to absolutely dislike elves more than most humans. But then the Nilfgaardians at the Citadel of the Gull, when they come to pick their mages, they were definitely human. So, it was something I just wasn't entirely sure on.
It's quite a significant correction.
That's
major apologies to our fellow Witchers for getting that so wrong.
No. The one thing I will say, and the reason potentially you do think it is, Cahir, who is the Nilfgaardian soldiers that's chasing, the main soldier that's chasing Ciri, he has a winged helmet. Yeah. Which is kind of feathered and it looks pointed eared almost. Yeah. So that's probably one of the reasons you're like, it does look like he has pointed ears in the helmet, but it's actually just, it's a helmet.
I think it was probably because later on in a few of the episodes, them talking about the wiping out of the Elvish race effectively and them taking their lands off them. I think hearing those kind of discussions going on, I just assumed this was an elven race versus a human race. So there you go. Something new there. Let's get on to the second episode of the show.
Episode 2.
4 marks, episode 2.
Yes. Bullied and neglected, Yennefer accidentally finds a means of escape. Geralt's hunt for a so-called devil goes to hell, and Ciri seeks safety in numbers.
And this episode was again directed by Alik Sakharov. The episode was written by Jenny Klein. We know Jenny Klein again, another member of the team of the Defenders, writers from Netflix. She wrote season 2, episode 9 of Jessica Jones as well. So somebody else that we've talked about on the podcast before.
Yeah, it's a good old group of friends that we've talked about quite a lot. And hopefully they listen to this show and are going, what? No, I didn't mean that. But we are completely misinterpreting their opinion.
Yeah.
Anyway, what did you guys think of the episode 2?
I really enjoyed episode 2, and I think ultimately it comes down to, I suppose, my big point. Should I don't know.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it ultimately comes down to Yennefer, and I know, Chris, this is your point as well, but I just thought it was really, really interesting having a character like Yennefer starting off here, and just her whole situation. You know, obviously her family doesn't love her, the village doesn't love her, she has the deformity on her back, and her face is kind of skewed. She's constantly being told she's worthless. I think ultimately she's sold for coin to Tissia, one of the mages, because ultimately behind this unassuming peasant girl in a backwater village, she has got magic abilities, or she is able to channel this ability where she portals to escape from the two kissers in the village who are having a go at her to the somewhere at the time. I don't think we know who it is, but this is where she meets Istred, but ultimately she's portaled herself to the Citadel of the Ghoul, where all this magic is taking place, and ultimately where she finds herself when Tissia, who has bought her and brought her to the Citadel of the Ghoul to further train Yennefer. So I think she's a really, really interesting character.
Yeah.
The other quick kind of sub-major point that I really like about this magic is, a bit like with Doctor Strange, it has a price. And I love that stone and the flower moment when they're all around in a circle with the stone and the flower on the desk, and Tissia asks everyone to elevate and raise the rock off the table using their magic. And one of the girls, you know, it is kind of like, oh, look, I'm doing it, as it effectively withers her hand, because the price for that magic that she's just used is her hand withering. Very sort of Dumbledore in terms of what happens, and actually that you needed to hold the flower and wither the flower to raise the stone. So I thought this was really, really interesting. But we also see, I suppose, Yennefer maybe not understanding her powers as well as the others at this moment in time.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's really interesting that we find out later that Tissia knows how powerful she really is, and she's pushing her down the path of power, basically, because she knows what's there. She knows the other girls can do tricks and can do glamours, that kind of stuff, but by the fact that Yennefer used this portal system to move herself away from trouble, that gives the indication to Tissia that this is a very powerful person. If she can just be channeled down the right path, then she'll have another powerful mage at her side. It's funny that you mention Harry Potter, John, because instantly this moment with Tissia where she gets picked up for four coin from her parents, instantly what was in my head was, this isn't like Hagrid coming over going, "You're a wizard, Harry," is it? It's really
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you're being stolen from your family, who hate you anyway because you're made to sleep with the pigs. This is awful. Like, you know,
yeah, it's really brutal.
As we know from Harry Potter, he's like made sleep under the stairs. His family do hate him as well, but there's a moment of light that comes when Hagrid comes to him and brings him to wizarding school. This is you're being dragged off kicking and screaming from, even though the people hate you, you don't want to go, you know? But I do like the progression of that story. I think all of us have this as probably our big point. The character of Yennefer, I think, is fascinating in this show because she realizes the power in everything, and then she wants it. She wants all of the power for herself. Like, there's an interesting moment with this character where she's effectively told that she can get surgery to make herself look beautiful. And she doesn't go for it because she wants beauty. She goes for it because she wants the power that is held within beauty for other people, which I think is a really interesting thing about Yennefer's character. To make another Harry Potter analogy, it's almost like Voldemort going after the Elder Wand because it's the most powerful wand, which will therefore make him more powerful. This is Yennefer going, oh, okay, well, I can get surgery and make myself look beautiful, which gives me the power of beauty over other people. So when I walk into a room, everybody will know how powerful I really am. I love that choice. I love that idea that it's not to do with herself feeling like she needs to be beautiful. It's to do with herself going, I know what that power is over other people. That's a great difference that she has here in the
Absolutely,
show.
because, and I think it comes to, she's told she's worthless by her family, and then she realizes that the city that she would be placed in by the Mage Council, she's not getting the one that she thinks she is because she wouldn't look right, and because she is a quarter elven as well. So this idea of her, she suddenly understands that for the rest of this world, the power of beauty that she needs to attain in order to have even more power over them. And I think that's again, as you say, that's the interesting thing about her, is her ultimate goal is power. And strength, and she has those conversations as well with Tissia, that she doesn't want this and that. She just wants to be more powerful, and to prove this. And she thinks that her magic power is all that would take her to her assignment. And in the end, through a combination of her deformity as well as her bloodline, she's told no. So she then recognizes the power effectively of optics, or of the superficial within this world. And again, later on, I'll leave it till later on for me, you also then get sort of a sudden thud of realization from her in episode 4 on the beach, which is really, really interesting.
Well, we'll definitely get into that one.
Absolutely.
Chris, do you have anything else on this point, or is this similar to your point? Well, actually, this is similar to your point for the episode, isn't it?
Exactly. Like, Yennefer is my point. I love this character for years.
Right.
She's really well portrayed in the books, and even, in personal opinion, better portrayed in the game. The character has always, as you say, at first glance, the story of Yennefer is kind of like, oh, poor hunchback that like makes herself beautiful and then wins everything. And it's like, no, you see, in this choice by the writer and the way that they portray the character, that she, I'm not going to belabor the point that you've already said, like, she chooses to do all these things for power. And one of the key turning points you see this in, and I don't think a lot of people got it because it's very subtle, to a degree, which is when her friends, or basically her schoolmates, are sacrificed and turned into eels so that their powers will stay within the fortress. And basically she doesn't care. Yeah. She's like, because that power becomes her power.
It's that moment when she realizes what's actually happened. She thinks that Tissia has converted her friends into worms, as she says. And it's only when Tissia slightly explains to her, then she goes, oh, okay, well then I don't care. It is very much that twist in her as well.
That was a great moment as well, because you see her self-doubt, even though she's been picked by Tissia, even though that was because she was bought like a slave, and yes, it's not the happy ever after Harry Potter type of thing of being accepted by fellow mages. She plays that self-doubt, or, like catching the lightning in the bottle, all of this thing that she seems to be failing at consistently, or not doing as well as other members. And you can see the jealousy, but also the self-doubt, and then the determination of what she wants to do. You can see, like, she's really sort of nicely portrayed here.
I'm finding it really difficult not to talk about all of Yennefer's story here, because I think it is the most intriguing of the show. There's a great moment where she's talking to Eastred later on and says to him, do you remember that girl that fell at your feet with no confidence in herself? I want to go back to where I'm from with this power and never be her again. I think that's fascinating, because what she's saying is, I'm going to be going back to the exact same place, but now I know who I am. Now I have the confidence in my abilities, and now it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of me. I have this power. It does make me think that potentially in the books and the games, this is the villain of the piece, and we're getting her origin story. I don't want that question answered. That is a rhetorical question. That's just how I feel by the end of episode 4, that Yennefer is on the path to being the villainess, wanting all of the power in this world. But that's just where I think she's going. I think we're going to see Geralt versus Yennefer rather than her siding alongside Geralt.
Well, just to that point as well, I kind of feel that is this the other person that Stregobar is talking about?
Definitely.
And certainly we see his machinations with Istrid as well, and everything there. Again, another thing that really for Yennefer seems to say that it's only herself that she can sort of believe in and trust, that this world is far too sort of fickle, really, and far too devious against her specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very quickly, there's another part of episode 2 which we should discuss, which is essentially, as we brought up very briefly in episode 1, the elves, and the Geralt's having to look for the devil with the horns, where we see the second side of the prosthetic CGI, or sorry, the prosthetics versus CGI.
Right.
This is Goatman, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We meet the elves and the I can't even remember the monster's name. It's not even a monster. The Goatman. And you see the difference between what we just saw with the Kikamora in episode 1. And then you see the elves, which are like, okay, elves look human with just bigger ears. And then you see Goatman, and I'm like, oof, oh. This is where they didn't, in my own personal opinion, they lost some points on that.
Yeah, just from the look of it, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't the best prosthetics. It just looked slightly off.
Yeah.
See, that didn't look like prosthetics to me. That actually looked like he was a CGI creation, and that's so difficult to carry off. There's only a few examples of where CGI has stood side by side on screen with prosthetics, and Gollum would probably be the best example of it, but there's so many other failures of it. And he should have been more prosthetics than CGI. He looked like there was maybe some CGI enhancements that made him look unreal in the scene.
Yes, exactly. Because we do get some prosthetics later in episode 4, which look good.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I thought the Hedgehog Knight was... looked really good. I thought those prosthetics were really nicely done. I mean, I think with the goat one as well, dare I say it, a bit like with the Cats movie that's just recently come out, when you're trying to put
Uncanny Valley.
Well, when you're trying to put an animal look onto a human, I think it can potentially look weird. Anyway, goats have got those kind of beady eyes on the side, and it's like, can you actually do it? So maybe this was the 5 minutes worth of cats in The Witcher, where you just kind of go, it's really difficult to put a goat look onto a human head. It's kind of like, at least for centaurs, the bottom half is a horse, the top half is more human looking. So it's. I just wondered whether it was the Cats moment with Goatman, because I thought Hedgehog Knight was really, really good.
Now, you do say that about centaurs, but I do remember the first appearance of centaurs in Harry Potter, where they had Forensic, was not very good. It wasn't a very good version of the character.
But that was a CGI.
It was CGI as well. What I would say, though, is there's some things that probably, even on the massive Netflix budget, aren't going to be movie quality. This definitely felt like one of those. But I do want to come back to your point, Chris, because this was part of my point. The idea of the elves in the show, I did talk about it in episode 1 incorrectly, but this is the episode where we hear much more about it effectively, that the elves are being ethnically cleansed. There's quite a significant story here where you hear the bard talking to the elves going, oh, well, you left your home willingly. And they're looking at him going, who the hell leaves their home and their crops willingly? We were forced out of there. All of our people were murdered. And you sit there looking at the crops that are growing in the blood of our kin and praise yourselves for what you've done taking our land away. I think that's a really interesting thread of a story there that needs to be brought up more. And I hope the show is going to focus on that side of it much more, to build on this world and this universe, rather than just it be a fetch quest of a show. Every episode, Geralt gets a quest and he needs to meet different people. This is the stuff that I'm finding really interesting in the background that's going on.
Yeah, I think that the elves are a subspecies that are being persecuted was an interesting twist. And certainly when you compare that, say, to something like Lord of the Rings, where they're very highly esteemed, even though not necessarily always trusted, I thought that was kind of interesting. And of course, you do mention the other point that we do have to raise here, because like him or loathe him, there is the bard, there is Jaskier.
Well, that was my point for this episode.
Okay, well, take it away.
I loathe this character. And I think he's meant to be loathed, to be honest, for that opening moment where you hear him singing a song about abortions in a bar, and then they tell him to go abort himself and throw stuff at him. I was totally with the patrons of that bar. He's absolutely the most irritating character. He feels like a character out of the game Fables, those excellent, very funny comedy games that are on the Xbox and PlayStation. He feels like a character out of that dropped into Game of Thrones. I think if it was in Game of Thrones rather than The Witcher, he probably would have had his throat slit by the end of the episode, to be honest. I don't really understand, even after episode 4, I don't really understand why Geralt's putting up with him, tagging along with him the whole time, apart from he just can't get rid of him.
I think that's the beauty of it.
He's a bard.
Yeah. I think that's the beauty of it. I loved this character, and do not lie, Derek. You were singing his little tune of "Toss a coin to your Witcher."
I was singing
"O Valley of Plenty."
I was singing "Toss a coin to your baker." He bakes you cakes. "Toss a coin to your butcher." He makes your dinner. I was singing all the versions of that awful song that I could have. Toss a coin to your podcaster over in Patreon, and you might hear some more.
O Valley of Patreon. Yes, exactly. But I really like the bard here, Jaskier, and I think it's mainly just because I just like the deadpan of Henry Cavill here as Witcher, and the relationship that he absolutely doesn't want him along, but can't shake him. Dare I say it, isn't it one of the great overused but still fantastic tropes of fantasy? The unwanted sort of sidekick or traveller, whether it's the bard here, whether it's in Willow, whether it is in Princess Bride, or whether it is in The Lord of the Rings, say with Merry and Pippin. Really good. And so I kind of like this, and I think I just loved how Geralt sort of despises him, really, and talks to him.
Let me be clear about my point, I suppose. I feel like I'm supposed to dislike this character, and the actor's doing a great job of making me really dislike him. Yeah, so I'm probably feel like I'm on Geralt's side. He's annoying, he's irritating, but he's there, and you're right, it is definitely a trope. I don't expect him to go away anywhere. It just shows the difference in this show from other shows, I suppose. That's all I mean. So
Jaskier is known as Dandelion in the books and the game, right? So as you dive deeper into the game, into the books or the comics, you'll see this character. They become very close friends. Roach is Geralt's best friend. This would become second. And over the course of the 4 episodes, he does become useful in that you see that he does actually build the story of the song of Geralt of Rivia, the Butcher of Blackfyr. Is kind of, he has his own kind of bard who is singing about him, just like the kind of making Geralt a known quantity.
Don't we all want someone to follow us around and sing our theme tune all the time?
Yeah, exactly. And I will say that song is just like fantastic. It's everywhere. It's I have it on Beat Saber now. It's just it's in your head. And I was just amazed at it's these little ones that does kind of carry on, because I've heard people who haven't even heard of what the show is. They've just heard the song because other people have seen it.
Excellent stuff.
And I'm like, okay, that's when you know kind of memes are hitting a point in kind of pop culture.
Of course.
Where it's just, it's fantastic.
Do you know what it felt like? It did feel like a little bit like a game mechanic, if I can explain that to non-gamers a little bit. It feels like, every time Geralt does something, the bard sings his praises in the next 10, and then they'll pay more coin to have that particular Witcher. So it kind of feels like a game mechanic translated into a TV show, where there's no real need to have the bard around. But if in a game you had this character around and he went into the 10 ahead of you to sell who you were and sell your reputation before you get there, then you develop and build up more gold for doing a job for those people. That's
exactly.
what he feels.
He's increasing his profile within the world of The Witcher. Just before we get on to episode 3, just a quick thing. Ciri is still on the run from the Nilfgaardians. Her family obviously aren't as acclaimed or as good or perceived to be good as maybe we think, but whether it's her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother, her great-great-great-grandmother, as well as the royal courts. I think that's kind of interesting. And she meets, I think, Dara in this episode as well. Another person on the run, I think, from Cintra as well.
Yeah.
So again, you know, her story is still very much one of on the run from the Nilfgaardians. And I think we, you know, get the sense that certainly her, the queen of Cintra is not necessarily the most benevolent person there, as viewed by her sort of subjects, I suppose.
I like that in this episode they kind of take away the possible hiding spots for Ciri effectively, because what we see when she's with Dara, Rat Boy as she calls him when she meets him first, because she's really nice. She sees the Cintran flags on the horizon and goes straight for them, and then she feels like she's going to be saved by them, effectively. But we find out that the Nilfgaardians are effectively doing their own purge and ethnic cleansing of her people, effectively. They're going after every outpost that escaped from the castle, trying to find her and killing all of them. So I like that they kind of pulled the rug out from under them and took away her hiding spots, I suppose. So now she's completely alone, effectively, because she won't want to go back to any more of her people in case this happens again. One interesting one, Chris, and you might be able to maybe point a little bit to this. I don't know whether there's something in there. The people that she's staying with have, it looks like a servant with them, who's a dwarf, I think. And the minute the Nilfgaardians attack, he instantly turns on them and kills the mother, effectively.
Yep.
Is something in there that I'm missing, or something in there that might be better explained?
Class warfare, humans. It's kind of what you discussed with the elves. The non-human races are sometimes treated less than, or usually treated less than. They're seen as servants. They're seen as, typically the dwarves are treated as kind of slaves. So, and this dwarf was treated badly. We see like the lady of the house basically sees Ciri's shoes and says, "Oh no, we can't live that." And then she calls the servant, and he has to give her his shoes.
Yeah.
There and then, and it's constantly belittled by the mother, constantly kind of yelled at. So he kind of takes. It does. I don't know. It's not shown much more outside of these episodes. I'm assuming hopefully it will come in later on, but it is also seen with like the genocide of the elves.
Yeah. So not a servant, not their butler, basically a slave of these people who takes the opportunity to kill one of them when they attack. Like, this is the other thing that I think will hopefully ramp up as the season goes on. You know, we talked about it in episode 1 where we heard about Renfrey say to Geralt that both of them have been made the way that they are. So that's also intriguing, that he's not human and she wasn't human as such, and they were all mistreated by the humans. So I presume we're going to see that kind of, as you say, class warfare come up in future episodes as well.
Yep. Speaking of future episodes, this moves us on to episode 3, Betrayer Moon.
Yes, Betrayer Moon, episode 3. Geralt takes on another witcher's unfinished business in a kingdom stalked by a ferocious beast. At a brutal cost, Yennefer forges a magical new future.
Yeah, this for me was one of the best episodes, on multiple reasons.
Yeah.
So, top of my list, you've got the culmination of Yennefer's origin story to a degree. You've got the Geralt fight with the Striga. You've got a Striga that looks fantastic. You've got the first, the first one I caught of the multiple timeline kind of evidence, although there is in earlier episodes points, which I'll discuss towards the end of this episode, but this is the first one I caught of the multiple timelines. Okay. And you've got further kind of, movement on Ciri's story. So for me, this was really just fantastic.
This was definitely, my favorite episode. I couldn't resist talking about this episode already. So I've kind of already jumped into Yennefer's story back in our episode 2 section earlier on. So this definitely was the one that kind of tied a lot of things together for the show, I think. So I really, really enjoyed it. The episode was directed by Alex Garcia Lopez, who we know for his work on Punisher, Misfits, Daredevil, Cloak and Dagger. So he's been heavily involved in loads of the shows that we've already talked about in the past. The episode was written by Beau DeMayo, who's did an episode of the originals. This is the first time we've talked about Beau DeMayo. So a new person on the show in writing one of my favorite episodes, which is quite good, or one of our favorite episodes for the show. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alex, I think, did one of the best episodes of the season 2 of Punisher for me as well, where it really went into small town America with the Punisher. I thought that was really nicely done. So yeah, I really enjoyed his stuff, and I think it's really nicely shot as well for this episode as well. It's funny when you describe it, Chris, about how this episode brings everything together. I absolutely agree, but I think initially when I watched episode 3, I was still just going, what the hell is going on? Because I think episode 2 really, with the different timelines, I was still at this stage was kind of just going, okay, I'm still confused. And I think and I think maybe not only because I really enjoy the character of Yennefer, but I think just because you went from episode 2 with Yennefer into episode 3, that was the thing I latched onto. So I think whilst I love the streaker thing, I love the kind of horror element of that. Certainly, the haunted castle in a sense, with the beast, the monstrous beast. The rest of it, I didn't quite know how to place it with what I had seen before. And maybe again, it will come out later on, or maybe it's just Geralt on his journeys doing what witches do. So, it's just a progression of that. So, but I totally agree with how you kind of summarized the episode. But I think on first watch, I was just like, yeah, with everything with Abba and the King Fall test, it was, okay, I don't know why these are here.
Right.
But
in fairness, we're watching the show, it was only by the time we got to episode 4 when they specifically say this is a different timeline. That's the only time I was even looking for it. I just assumed we were in different places for the first 3 episodes. I wasn't even thinking in my head that these could be in different timelines at all.
The only reason I at this point, so up to episode 1, 2, I thought this was all continuous, just one big story. And it's only in episode 3 where, yes, King Folstes is the one who tasks Geralt with killing the Striga, which is his daughter, because he basically had incest with his sister. And in the castle where the Striga is, where Geralt and Triss are fighting or looking for the Striga, you see a painting of a young boy and a young girl who is King Folstes and his sister. And that painting is of the 2 children. Later in the episode, the party that Yennefer attends after having her transformation, you literally see those 2 children.
Oh, okay.
It's basically them
really
from
good.
the photo in it. And it was because we're introduced to the king's mother at that point, so it would have been the queen back then, literally calls the 2 kids. And it's the same names. And I went, oh, and it looks to say, okay, right, now I'm starting to see there's massive differences in times. That's the first point for me. Yeah. And then in point 4, in episode 4, it's kind of directly called out. But actually, I might as well bring it up now very quickly, since we're discussing it. In episode 1 and episode 2, so this episode 3 was the first big hint that I found, right? In my first watch too, and I went, oh, okay. And that was the painting. That's the blinking, you'll miss it. There's actually, as I said, there's episode 2, there's hints in that episode, and even episode 1, where it's, because we don't know the words, we don't know what they're talking about, but it actually is called out there. Because Musak warns Ciri about when girls used to be locked in towers many years ago. Right? And then, but those events are kind of only just happening or just pretty recent when Geralt's talking to Stregobor at the beginning, in the very first episode. And then Calanthe and Ciri in the first episode discuss Calanthe's victory at the Battle of Hawkbuzz, and that was in the past.
Right.
That was well before Ciri was born. It was back actually in episode 4. And then this is the battle that Renfri discusses in episode 1, which had just taken place.
Right. See, that's the thing. There's no way, I think, on a first watch, there's no way that you would pick up any of these. Well, there's no way.
Yes, exactly.
Let me say, there's no way I could have picked up any of these references. No way I would have seen a painting on a wall and connected it with a person later on in the episode. I think when I talked to John about it, what I said was a lot of TV shows that do this type of thing, where you're talking about different timelines, say, for example, Westworld, which is probably the most recent big example. The way that they do it is stunt casting. You cast a specific actor in a role where you present them a bunch of times throughout a series, and then when you put them all side by side, you suddenly are able to go, oh, okay, the reason why he's there and there is because we're in different timelines, you know? Doing a show like this, where there's not very many named actors in the show, other than Henry Cavill, who is your main point of view, other than him, there's nobody there that you'll suddenly be able to latch onto and go, oh, okay, well, they're in a different timeline. Really, until you do get to episode 4 and have that moment with the Queen and go, hang on a second, I kind of recognize her. And it's only, I think, at the end of that episode that you're able to maybe go back and go, right, there's other stuff. But it's cool that you caught a couple of them, Chris.
Yeah, and like I said, you're 100% right. I did not catch, the only one I caught in my first watch through was the painting of Falstess. The parts I discussed in episode 1 and 2, it was in my second viewing when we were starting to pull together our notes for this, that I was like, right, okay. Now that I've seen all 4 episodes and I know what's coming, I'm listening for these things. I know what's happening. I was out on the lookout for this. And yeah, it was just really interesting. So anyway, that's the multiple timelines. That is where we had, and this is where we start getting the discussion. The one thing I did want to call out about episode 3, this has been said to me twice by 2 different people, is the incest. Which is, why do fantasy novels, and especially fantasy novels that discuss royalty, fall back on incest so often? And I went, actually, fair point. Yeah. I know that, I don't know for sure. I'm pretty sure this is one of the short stories as well. Right. The King Falstess and the Striga. But it's actually true. Incest is a big thing in Game of Thrones and this and, most other royalty-based, kind of medieval shows.
Well, that's exactly the reason for it, Chris. I suppose you've hit it right in your wording of it. It's about royalty, and royalty is nothing but
incest.
Pure blood. Well, not exactly what I was going to say, John. No, royalty is purely about bloodlines. It's all about bloodlines. And if you think about that, all that is a small pool of people who are saying we are in power because of our blood. So from the lay person, from people outside of royalty, you instantly go, well, hang on a second, you're sleeping with your cousin. And if I did that, then it would be called an incest. Whereas if you do that, it's called keeping the royal gene bloodline going effectively. So,
And you can see that, the reason with the haemophilia amongst the Russian Tsars, because it was genetically carried through the bloodline because they were sleeping with cousins, this, that, and the other. I think incest in fantasy is because I always wonder whether it's going back to an earlier time. It's based around superstition, a lot, lore, legends, myths, all this kind of thing. And, it's always kind of, they're generally always feeling a little medieval in terms of that. Absolutely. You've got the whole royalty. So obviously incest is actually being shown from on high to preserve the bloodline. So it happens with village folk because they are, dare I say it, looking up to how you should behave. And also maybe you just can't travel as far. They don't have a web-based app that they can look for diverse people.
Well,
but
I think it's a weird thing, obviously, because you're talking about a king here who effectively the king could have whoever he wanted, and that's where the oddness comes in. But it is a trope, and remember, there is nothing in fantasy at this stage, because there's been so many different fantasy universes. There's nothing in fantasy I've ever read that it doesn't start as a trope and then a kind of a twist on it from whoever the author is. What I suppose I kind of like about this is the twist towards the end of it really is the fact that this monster that's created out of their union is not because of their union. It's created because somebody used magic on them to punish them for what happened. And I like the comment at the end from the king where he says, will my daughter be safe after this? Because it's not her fault just because they had a union. It's nothing to do with this child that was born out of it. So I kind of like the slight twist, I suppose, on the idea of it, that it's nothing to do with the child. The child doesn't have to have an awful life, has had an awful life, and he's willing to bring her back into the fold and hopefully bring her up better in future if she gets saved by the Witcher. So it's a little twist on it. But I think, yeah, absolutely, Chris, you're right. This is a trope of fantasy, but there is absolutely a reason of it. We are talking about bloodlines and the gene pool. So of course there's going to be some very odd couplings within that universe.
So to kind of close off the story of the Striga, before we move and discuss Yennefer, because I know, Derek, we have to finish this discussion because I have bits on this as well. So on the Striga, what I really enjoyed, first of all, the fight. And this was where I said later on, it seems when they could put someone in a stunt kind of body and they could kind of, it looks a bit more practical. This looked good. This Striga effect, in my opinion, looked fantastic. And I was really happy with the fight. We get to meet Triss Marigold, who is another sorceress. She is a big character from the books and the game. And I don't want to give away too much because I don't know how much she'll be used. But she is one of the lead characters, or one of the main characters from the other kind of stories. So it's interesting that we just see her just once. So we take that what would you will. But yeah, so that was, I really enjoyed this episode. For me, as I said, like, this was one of the best ones, and it shows that the Witcher just doesn't always kill things. He uses his skills to sometimes save, versus just the hired assassin to go kill monsters.
Well, I think it does come back to the central theme, really, of what's going on with the Witcher as a character. He feels like he was created by whoever it is, and we may find it out in the future, that he is the Witcher and he was created that way. And when he sees other people go kill that monster, unless it's actually a monster, he's not going to kill it. This is not a monster. This is a child who has a curse put on her, and if he can lift the curse, he will try and save her as best he can. If he can at least defeat her and stop her from killing him, then he'll save her. So I do like that. We see that throughout the 4 episodes that we have. So that's pretty cool. John, do you want to give us the thing that you want to talk about for this episode?
Mine was just basically the Scream Fest. There was a moment, and I really enjoyed both parts, but as it came together, I thought my ears were going to bleed with the amount of screaming. I thought the fight between the Witcher and the Screecher was really, really good. I thought there was great horror element where the guy who had put the curse upon her, upon Abba, was tied to the bed because Geralt wanted to know how to undo the curse. I love the fact that because it takes the whole night, he just suddenly lets out his exclamation because he knows he's now got to fight this really powerful monster for the entire night.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh God, right, okay, let's get on with this.
I also love the chain around her to begin the fight, and then she breaks the chain instantly.
Exactly. Again, as you say, Chris, you see a bit more of Geralt's powers. He's using a chain, not just a sword. We see him. I love that moment where he blasts the floor out from under them, and they fall down with the magic, and puts the sort of the force field of magic to stop her from leaving the room and to stop her entering her own tombstone. I thought that was, or hibernation point, I suppose. I thought that was really, really good. So I absolutely enjoyed all this sequence, and I also then enjoyed the sequence of Yennefer, sort of taking that moment to change herself, because she effectively, I suppose, in terms of reading the society in which she lives in, she realizes she, to be more powerful, must become beautiful, because that's what this society appreciates. However wrong that is, she does that. And she has this transformation at the Citadel of Gulls. But there is a moment where they're cutting between the two, and there is so much screaming. I just kind of chuckled, to be honest. I absolutely loved both sets of it, but I just started laughing because I just thought either all our glassware in the house was about to smash, or I was about to start bleeding from every orifice, because it really ramped up on the Scream Fest. Yeah, and I thought that was really, really funny. Yeah, and as I say, I think the horror element where the guy who puts the curse on the Striga, I just think getting his comeuppance, I thought was really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ending off with his entrails on the floor afterwards.
It was a nice horror moment.
Yeah, definitely really, really good. Chris, anything else on this episode?
Yennefer. Really, the sacrifice she makes. So in the books and the source materials, witchers and sorceresses are infertile because of the use of magic, right?
Right.
So the use of magic is the reason they cannot bear children or anything like that. So there's a bit of there's a liberty or a change in the source material here where Yennefer makes this decision to have this sacrifice of her uterus to physically transform into the Yennefer we see at the end of the episode. And I find that, again, what we've already discussed, her kind of the sacrifices she's willing to make for power. And for me, this is this is the ultimate sign of that sacrifice, I think, that she's willing, and she discusses it and she looks at it and she wasn't going to, and then she does.
Right.
And for me, it's I found it so interesting to see that this origin of the character and the sacrifice she's willing to make to become who she wants to be.
Yeah.
I thought it was fantastic.
And I think, I've really already mentioned that this was definitely going to be my point before we started recording about the episode. But I think the idea that this sacrifice is about attaining more power for her makes me feel like she's twisting into a more evil, power-hungry character. In a way, that's just my feeling. This is the moment where you kind of realize that she's not doing it because she wants to be pretty for her boyfriend. is what this could have been in any other hands. This is her going, I know that people here will give me whatever I want if I can go through this procedure, and I'm going to do it because I want to get whatever I want. So we'll see how that pays off for a little bit in the next episode, but I just like that little touch. It would definitely be remiss of me before getting out of episode 3 to not talk about the sexposition at the beginning of this episode. Such a trait of Game of Thrones that they got criticised for using it almost every episode. A woman lying on the bed with her breasts out while the main character gets a dump of information. And this is exactly what's happening here. We hear the Witcher has been sitting in this room for 3 days waiting for this piece of information. Well, not really waiting. Using his pride and joy for the 3 days, but not able to pay for it, which I also think is quite interesting. What happens when a Witcher has been staying at your brothel for 3 days, not paying his bills? How do you kick him out? He's one of the most powerful beings on this planet, able to kill any monster that comes across him. If you're a landlord, even a big landlord like this guy who pretends he's not scared of Geralt. for a whole 3 seconds and then tells him he's going to keep his horse. You know, but is that enough? What would you do? Has he been trying to kick him out every morning for the 3 mornings going, right, just get out now and pay me, will you? I do think it's just one of those funny things because it's such a trope that we've seen so many times in the past to keep people interested in fantasy stories. Stick a naked woman on the screen, you know, it seems to be a standard thing to do.
So sexposition really is a big part of The Witcher.
Yeah.
Like they in the books, it's everywhere. In the games, it's everywhere. They are some very randy characters, and I was fully expecting it in this show. And this is. But as you said, it's an interesting. It's interesting way of just like, yeah, you know, we're naked people everywhere. That's how we do it. We're going to explain it. We need to explain this quite kind of boring part. Do you know what we do? We need to explain some of these scars and just tell some of the previous stories. Oh, do you know what we do? We'll just get them to strip off. Yeah, that will do. It'll work. And I'm like, yeah, it actually does work. Yeah, go for it.
Definitely have to point out it's as always in these types of shows, it's naked women everywhere. It's not naked men. They still haven't made that.
You get a lot of topless Henry Cavill.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all for that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The one reason I wanted to bring this up about the sex position, not just about that, it is such a standard in the show and probably the books and the games, but the piece of information that's in there, which I just thought was fascinating that we learn, is there are other Witchers, and there are active Witchers at the moment. For some reason, for the first 3 episodes, up until this point, the show's called The Witcher. We have Geralt. We've heard about the fact that he was created. I didn't realize up until this point that they are a guild. He talks about it with the dwarves. He says to them, I'm going to give you a discount effectively because this guy ran off with your money. That's from my guild to your guild. So there are many, many Witchers in the world. This is just one of the Witchers. Just because of that definite article of The Witcher, I just assumed this was the only person that did what he did. So we may see more of them later on in the series. The other guy didn't fare very well. But there are other Witchers out there, which I just thought was interesting in there. Let's get on to episode 4 of Banquets, Bastards and Burials.
Yes, against his better judgment, Geralt accompanies Jaskier to a royal ball. Ciri, meanwhile, wanders into an enchanted forest, while Yennefer tries to protect her charges.
Tries and doesn't do very well in this episode. So, there's loads of stuff going on in this episode. We've talked about the timelines a number of times before, but there's one specific one from Yennefer, and it's the only time we actually hear a number of years mentioned. She is working for the family that she wanted to work for in another land, the place that she wanted to work in, and she says, I've been working here for 3 decades doing this job, just sorting out people's political problems. I wanted to be the person with power, and all I've been doing is sorting out political squabbles for this entire 30 years. So that's the first time we've seen this massive difference in time between what's going on in the other worlds and how long this story is taking place over, I suppose. So I just thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, Chris, what's your point?
For me, it's the law of surprise and how that it surprisingly plays into quite a large part of what I'm assuming is going to be this series. So for everyone, just to very quickly recap it, we are given, we can explain how he gets there, but Geralt is at the betrothal. I don't know what would you call it? Basically, Queen Calanthe and her daughter are taking offers for the hand in marriage for
it's betrothal.
Yeah, it's basically, all right, who's going to do the best? Come on, everyone stand up and kind of discuss. So we get that, and then we do get Dunny comes in, who has secretly been in love and has been meeting with Pavetta for years, or for quite a while. He has been cursed, and he basically, when he was not cursed, saved Queen Calanthe's husband and called on the law of surprise, which is essentially when someone is owed a debt, they can invoke the law of surprise and claim something that is indebted, but they don't know what yet. So even if the person who's indebted, they may not even own it yet, but essentially I could come up to you, Derek, and go, I claim the law of surprise, and then a year from now, come and claim your car, but you don't even own a car yet.
Yeah.
That it's essentially that. But Dunny had claimed the law of surprise on Pavetta, and was going to use it, but it turns out they were deeply in love and everything was fine.
Well, he chose not to use it when he realized that what he was saying was, I'm getting your daughter. He chose not to use it and then decided to meet her out when he wasn't hedgehog or were hedgehog, as I've written into my notes, which is actually the opposite of what he is. At midnight, he turns back into a human, isn't it? Something like that. So it's kind of the
and that's
opposite
where they met and they fell in love.
Yeah. It's an interesting idea, an interesting concept, this whole thing of the law of surprise, this idea that you tell someone that as a reward, the next thing that you get that's a positive windfall effectively has to come to me. So from that point onwards, you stop playing the lotto, right? Until something surprising comes along, like somebody gives you a book for Christmas that you weren't expecting. Right. That book goes to the guy that challenged me for the law of surprise. The only thing, I suppose, and look, you kind of have to allow this in the show because they're trying to explain something quite significant. The only problem with it is we hear about this character who claimed the law of surprise, and his windfall effectively is a child born out of surprise that they didn't know about. Geralt claims law of surprise as his reward, and what he gets is also a surprising child, which is Ciri, effectively, that we find out at the end of the episode. Her mother is pregnant right now from the union between these two characters. So it's just interesting that law of surprise basically means give me your firstborn, which I don't know whether I want. I don't know whether I want the firstborn of a random person that I've just met up and saved.
It was just, I found it so funny. I loved the idea of how this was all pulled together and what it means and how they're Ciri and Geralt are bonded together, through this law of surprise. And it kind of extends over time and it's played back through the history of these main characters. I will fully admit I laughed out loud when he claims it. We get basically Pavetta pukes and it's like, oh, she's pregnant. Him going, oh shit. Uh-oh. And then lightning. And I was like, yeah, literally, it was like, hey, how can we say that this is important? And she's pregnant. All right, we're going to get her to puke. We're going to get him to swear. And we're going to have lightning and thunder as an effect to go, da, da, da. It was just kind of like, okay, yeah, you're leaning into the high fantasy here, kind of. Like, it's just, yeah, it was a choice and I went, it was funny.
Well, if you can't do it in this show, you can't do it in any show, right?
It's true, yeah, exactly.
This episode can still be quite confusing. It's an interesting idea that they do this fourth episode, probably about 15 years before episode 1 takes place, which is quite interesting because you have to de-age effectively all of the characters that you saw in episode 1 for a couple of minutes. Weirdly, it was Mousesack, the mage, that was the one that I went, hang on a second, I've seen him before, and he had grey hair. And he was in the first episode. So he was the one that made the connection for me when I wasn't even looking for the fact that there might be a different timeline for all of these characters. And I'll be honest, when I heard Geralt come in and call him Mousesack, I thought that was a joking name for him. It's only when Ciri calls him Mousesack later on you realize that's his name. I was like, Mousesack, that seems like an insult.
I was really happy at how they did this because they do explain like why Calanthe has her husband who talks about her daughter, not our daughter, her daughter, in the first episode, and also then mention like with Ciri in the room, and they're not talking about Ciri, and you're like, they explain this in this episode, with the characters there, but you also again you get these nice little tidbits of information with like. The sacking of Karen Morin is discussed between Mousesack and Geralt, right? And that is essentially Xavier's Institute for Witchers.
Right.
It's their home, it's their training ground, it's where they were. So what we're hearing in this, to a degree, and I'm sure it's going to come back later, is that essentially it's already been sacked. They've been attacked. Witchers are basically no one trusts them already. but it's happening at this point in the timeline. So I'm like, interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting to me about now we know there's multiple timelines. Where do these all sit and how and when? Mm-hmm. That kind of the interlacing of them.
So just, can you explain, just because I haven't read books or played the games, Chris, why is it specifically interesting that the Witchers being eradicated, or their homeland, I suppose, being taken away from them? Why is it interesting that's happening back here, which is possibly 15 years before the episode started? What is it about that? Is that something significant from the books?
Yeah, it's more that like the Witchers were known as the best demon hunters, mm-hmm. and they were trusted, right? Yeah. And I essentially, I don't want to give away too much, but at a point they were turned against. Right. Think of them, and they mention mutants, mm-hmm. because they are mutated to be able to basically do what they do, use the magic that they use, mm-hmm. the swordmanship, the power, the strength that they have. They have been mutated, and that happens in Kaer Morhen. And essentially this was the Xavier Institute. And this is a point people have already turned on them. Yeah. And they then become a necessary evil where no one trusts them, no one judges them, but people use them as
demon hunters.
Yeah. But they were always at a point similar to the sorcerers and sorcerers, where Witchers were they were like the knights, mm-hmm. and the sorcerers were the advisors, right? There was always the right hand and the left hand. So what we're saying here is that the sorcerers are already still going out and being part of each of the kingdoms and advising and being the secret hand. But by this point in time, the Xavier Institute, Kaer Morhen, has been sacked and destroyed. Yeah.
And we do hear in conversation between Geralt and the Queen, we hear him say, we haven't been able to create any new Witchers since the sacking. So effectively something like a moment that happened in the last episode, in episode 3, where another Witcher has been murdered and killed by a demon. Well, that means that they have less in their guild. They have less people. So we don't know how many Witchers are actually out there. What we do know is one just got killed by a monster that Geralt was able to defeat, but maybe there's only a few left now, and they have no ability to make more. I suppose the question I have at the end of the episode, and this is hopefully going to be explained in the future, possibly with this prize that Geralt's going to get of Ciri when they eventually do meet up. Does that mean that he's going to be able to train her in the ways of the Witcher, potentially, because she has some type of magic powers that she's able to use, like the Banshee power that she has? So interesting to think that maybe he'll be forming a new guild in future, or be bringing her into the guild or something like that, that there's some new connection between the two of them. But that's one of the main parts, I suppose, of the episode, right? This idea of the wedding that's taking place 15 years before the first episode.
Yeah.
John, do you have something that you want to talk about from the episode?
I think for me, it was Yennefer actually on the beach with the dead baby that she's failed to protect. She certainly wasn't about to protect the baby's mother from the assassination attempt, even though she did try to begin with. But certainly the royal lady, princess or queen, certainly started to get a little bit sort of ungrateful on Yennefer, so she just decided to up and leave her, which I thought was quite funny, quite apt really. And she comes back to save the baby, but she doesn't. But I think it's after that, it's just before she buries the baby. That conversation with the dead child by Yennefer, it is really, really instructive, because she's saying to the baby, despite what I've done to get the power, and I think by this she even means this beauty. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether she was disfigured or one of the most beautiful women in this world. She is being treated as a woman by this world that is something that she absolutely is now fed up with, and so it doesn't matter what you do, whether you're a powerful mage, whether you're a beautiful woman, you're still treated, I think, as she says, as a vessel. Yeah. And that's coming from, again, the conversation she has with this princess as they're trying to escape the assassin, and in the back of the the carriage just before the first attack by the assassin, where it's just like they are used as vessels for heirs to the throne. Or they are used to deal with just the political mess, to get rid of enemies, to sort things out. And ultimately, I think Yennefer's realization that the power of being a mage and the power of being beautiful, that means nothing. She's still being treated as a vessel. And actually, I suppose this for me is where the spark in her mind, I presume, of that to attain real power, she needs effectively to regime change. That the kings and queens of all these lovely sort of cities, the princes and the princesses, it's the established order that is the problem. And so do we see now, moving into the second half of The Witcher, Yennefer effectively saying it's more than fulfilling their wishes. It's about changing the system, I suppose, for want of a better word, or killing the people that do hold the power. And maybe she becomes a bit more radical in how she approaches it. And again, I'm hoping that, you know, we've been saying that she's the big bad, but actually she's coming at it from one that, you know, is she being bad? Is this not something that a lot of people have tried to do in the past? So, I'm really excited for that. So I really enjoyed this moment of Yennefer on the beach. And I think just another quick one for me, is the beginning in the inn with the Witcher. He's just killed a monster. He smells awful. You've got the bard, and he asks for a beer from the barman, who gives him something which must amount to just watered down beer. And it's the glance that Henry Cavill gives to him. He spits it out, and the glance that Henry Cavill gives to the barman is like, just what have you given me here? And he gets a fresh pint of ale. I just thought that was really, really just a nice little touch of you know, an inconsequential touch, but one that really adds to Geralt's character. You know, he doesn't suffer fools gladly, for sure, even if it amounts to the barman giving him a bad pint. So I thought that was really good.
It was a really funny moment, and then obviously we lead on to the bard and having the conversation with Geralt in the bath as well, which is a really funny one, where we have him trying to say to Geralt he's his only friend. I really like the kind of conversation where Geralt's saying to him, you know, you're not my friend. I don't respect you at all. There's no friendship between us. And he says, well, would you let anybody else rub chamomile on your lovely bottom? I think in my head, and I think I said it on our Facebook group when I was having a chat with one of our fellow Witchers, I was saying, well, I don't think I'd let any of my friends, you'll probably be very pleased to know, Chris, I don't think I'd let any of my friends rub chamomile on my bottom. If I had this annoying bard following me around all the time, I'd absolutely make him rub chamomile in my bottom.
Well, Jaskier is very, very lucky to rub chamomile into Henry Cavill's bottom.
There you go. But I don't think Chris would be very lucky to rub it into my
Could bottom. I rub some chamomile into your bottom?
Yeah, if you wanted to, as well.
Excellent.
I do love that they actually did the bath scene, because this has been thirst posts from the games for years. And as soon as everyone heard they were making this show, that it was cast as Henry Cavill, like everyone was like, yeah, okay, you're gonna do bathtub scenes, aren't you? Aren't you?
Of course they are.
And it was just, again, I think it was one of the first things we heard about from San Diego Comic-Con, when they showed some of the first scenes. They showed Geralt in the bath, and everyone was so happy.
Oh yes. Give them what they want.
Exactly.
I think another quick thing for me, we see it in episode 3 as well, is when Geralt seemingly is taking a potion. I don't know whether that's to heighten his powers, or that's the source of his powers, or it's like a rescue remedy, so sort of like, you know, getting new health in a computer game. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, but I was just wondering, you know, we see him taking a vial of potion to sort of sort him out.
I don't know how they're going to play this. So alchemy is used in this. Potions are used in this. Toxicity is used in the books. So it's not the source. Chaos is the source of magic, but it does sometimes, like, potions heighten.
Yeah.
But it also gives them additional strength. So we see in the very first episode, Geralt has the black pupils, the strained, he's pale, deathly pale, and the kind of streaks of black coming from his eyes.
Yeah.
That's from drinking these potions, the chemicals, the alchemical kind of, like, potions, I suppose. Yeah, toxic potions that give him, like, additional strength to fight these monsters. I think what this was like, okay, I'm too weak to stop it, so I need to boost my, magic, boost my chaos.
Yeah.
I suppose.
That really does feel like something out of the video game. Right?
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. These books, this series, like The Witcher, was born. It was made in such a way that I'm so glad CD Projekt Red made it into a game, because it is a game. Like, he has two swords, one for fighting monsters, one for fighting humans.
Yeah.
He has magic powers. But he only has these types of magic powers. He has to take potions and rest, but he can't take too many potions because it might kill him, so it'll take off his health. Like, this was built for a game. And the stories are so good that it was built for TV. It's just, it is really a transmedia piece. I think one of the best ones.
And you said comics as well, so
and comics,
obviously everywhere. The only other part of the story that we haven't really talked about is just the other side of what's going on with Ciri and the forest people, effectively. They just seem like stoners. I just thought it was very funny, where it's like, drink the water, everything will be fine. If you drink the water, you'll forget all about your past, and you look like someone that probably wants to forget all about their past.
Yeah, but it would kill them if they meant them harm, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
Oh, definitely. But I just thought it was quite an interesting little connection between the two. Very cool to see Josette Simon playing the leader of this group, because if you're as old as I am, you may remember her from a wonderful TV show from the 70s and 80s called Blake 7, where she played Dana on it.
Dude, you are really dating yourself with that one.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't date. Okay.
It was a great sci-fi, though.
Tell me, Blake
It was fantastic, and yeah, even I remember her from that. But like, oof, she's been in other stuff since then.
She's been in tons and tons of stuff, but instantly I saw her, I went, wow, that's Dana, and she looks amazing. She looks wonderful after all of these years. It's great to see her. She could walk straight back on to the ship and be part of Blake 7 again if they ever remade the show. Really cool to see her on there. But I suppose Ciri's story for me is probably the least interesting so far. It's a kid on the run. That's basically it. And they're playing it out. They're leaving us little bits of drips of a storyline that's going on with her. I really want to see more. I like by the end of this episode, you see that there is a connection with Geralt, and that he effectively will own this child in some way, whenever they eventually do meet up. And that's who she probably is aiming to go towards to find her destiny, as they keep mentioning in the show. So I'm hoping that her storyline will take off a bit more as we get into the end of the season and maybe into the next season. But at the moment, Child on the Run story, they're 10 a penny.
We do get that great moment where, Ciri has to go to the source of the forest of Brokilon Forest, and she has to drink from the tree. So I mean, real echoes of Lord of the Rings, and the Ent people, and the Galadriel in the forest of Threndril, and all of that kind of stuff. But I love that it kind of takes her to that spaced out zone where she's in a desert with the tree, this kind of like tree of life, just asking her, "What are you, child?" What a great way to finish this first half of The Witcher.
Yeah. It is a nice, as you said, it's a nice way to finish the first half, because that's what it feels like. By the end of this first half, these first 4 episodes, and if you think of this as part 1 and part 2 of the season, we've been given a lot of information, and a lot of exposition now, that we're starting to understand the origins of people. We understand that there's multiple timelines. We don't know how they fit together, but we understand there's multiple timelines. We understand who the bad guys are, who the good guys are, to a degree. So it is that finality, but it's that question of And actually, I'm going to echo both of you. The Tree of Life saying, "Who are you, girl?" is what but I'm with Derek, and like, she's the least interesting of the characters. So who is she? I know from the source materials who she is. I don't know how they're going to play with that, but who she is in terms of this show, I'm finding interesting.
As I said, I think it's just because it's being so slowly drip fed is probably the reason why I'm kind of going, oh, okay, just give us more information about her. Yeah. I love the fact that she's got this banshee power. I think that's cool. And I think it's interesting that the forest wants to know who she is and what's important about her. And now by the end of this episode, we know that at least she's connected in some way to Geralt. So we will definitely get more from her in the future. One thing that struck me was how close that Tree of Life, as you guys are calling it in the forest, how close it was to Stragobor's tree in the center of his kind of Eden palace in the first episode. It felt like there's some connection between the two, or whether he built his palace around a tree like that. We'll probably see more of that in the future of the show, but I just thought it was interesting because it looked so similar when I rewatched the episodes. So,
gentlemen, I think we've discussed the four of them, so I think it's time to kind of just do a quick wrap up of how we felt about these first four episodes, the kind of how we felt about part one of The Witcher season 1. Because I'm talking, I'm going to take my time and continue talking. So what I thought is, I'm really happy with it. I think the one thing I would, if I have to, I don't have to be harsh, but if I did have to be, critical, if you will, what I do find is that I think with the multiple timelines, they kind of went a bit too deep into it, in that it's not until that I rewatched it for the first 4 episodes a second time that I went, okay, now I see where you dropped a few hints there and there, but you don't, it takes 4 episodes, a good 4 hours, a good chunk of, like, what's call it 3.5 hours to really understand. Oh, okay, these are happening at different times. I understand what the writers and directors were trying to do, what Lauren was doing, which was, I'm not going to drip feed you everything. Very much actually echoing to a degree of what we just went off, which is The Watchmen, which is in kind of Damon's wheelhouse, which is, I'm not going to give you all the answers straight away. Yeah. We're going to give you pacey questions. I think that they haven't answered enough questions and posed us enough, while posing additional questions, if that makes sense. That's what The Watchmen did very well, which is over the first 4 episodes, they answered questions, but gave you 10 more for every one they answered to a degree. So I think there's a slight difference there, in that I think this multiple timelines, they could have given a few more hints and then potentially raised some additional questions. But overall, I really think they've done a good job. I'm interested to see where season 1 goes, how it ends. I'm happy with what they produced here, because this isn't something this is not an easy product to build, to write, to sell.
Yeah.
This is high fantasy. It has your elves, your witches, your warlocks, your magic, your knights, your monsters, your demons, your royalty. You've got your princesses, your princes. You've got all that stuff. And it's not as grounded in reality as a Game of Thrones is. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, aside from the dragons. But Game of Thrones didn't have the elves and all the kind of the magic and things like that. It just had dragons. This does have all the extra things. So as a whole, I'm really enjoying it. I just wish they had have been a bit less stingy with the timeline piece, because I think that's what put off a good few people, especially from me talking to people about these first 4, especially Kelly. Like, she fell out after 2 episodes because she just didn't enjoy it after 2 episodes. But I'm like, now that I've kind of teased her about what's happening, she goes, oh, that does sound interesting. Yeah. So anyway, that's how I feel. John, what about yourself?
I really enjoyed these first 4 episodes, to be honest. I think, the timelines were a struggle, just the whole amount of information, because it's not a property that I've delved into at all. But nonetheless, I think there was loads of intrigue here. I think some of it was fascinating. I really enjoyed Henry Cavill as Geralt. I think, he's got a real demeanor about him that works, I think, well for a loner person moving from town to town, slaying monsters ultimately, and who has a critical part in the shape and developments in this world. I think he's significantly skeptical about everyone, including the bard, and I like that kind of just lightheartedness. I think the monsters and the fighting have been great. Yennefer, absolutely, just a great character here to get onto, and I think just her path between episode 2 through to 4 has just been fascinating for me, and how she has ridden that. And that's why I would give this 4 chamomile moisturized botties out of 5. So yeah, absolutely. I loved it. Not understood everything, been confused multiple times, but hopefully that will also, just checking a few things with you guys on this podcast, but also with just a little bit of reading around some of the episodes, I've kind of come to understand how this has been done, especially on the timeline element of it. So, I think this is a really interesting world that has really gotten better as the episodes have gone on, really. So I'm looking forward to episode 5 for sure. Derek, what is your overall impression of The Witcher so far?
I'm liking it in general. I'm trying to work out where we got to this place. I've kind of bemoaned in the past how people watch TV differently than I do. And we're all different people. We all watch things in a different way. But it's weird nowadays when there's this kind of let's live tweet every episode until we get to the end of a series. I think that's where a lot of the pressure comes on opinions for a show. If you're going to give over only 1 hour of your life to a show like this, and then by the end of it go, well, I didn't understand anything in that episode, so I'm giving up on the series. You're a different television viewer than I am. The first 3 episodes of the show felt like a fantasy show with cursing and naked ladies in it. And that's kind of what I was expecting from the show. It didn't feel like anything more than that. With some creatures, different to what we saw in Game of Thrones, different to some of the other shows that we've watched, but it felt like a fantasy world where a guy was getting paid to go around and kill monsters. All I was expecting. It was episode 4, the twist in it showing that it was different timelines and these people existing in different periods, that actually made it a better show for me. It didn't make me understand the series more. It made me go, oh, you should have been looking in all the other corners that were going on so you could have understood the world a bit more. But I didn't mind, because I don't expect to go into any show with a brand new cast of characters that I've never heard anything about, knowing everything about them by the end of the episode. Hell, that's EastEnders, or Coronation Street, or One Life to Live. That's a soap opera that you know everything about all the characters after 1 hour of a show. I don't need to know that. I need to know that this is a world that I want to watch the characters in for the series. By the end of the 4th episode, I do want to watch the characters in the series, and now I want to know what's going to happen to them in the future. It wasn't much more than the standard concept of a fantasy show for me after the 1st episode. But by the end of the 4th episode, it certainly is. So certainly liking. I'm glad, Chris, you made the decision to split this up into the 2 episodes at this point. I'm glad that you made the decision to do it right here, because I don't think I would have really enjoyed going through episode by episode, having not watched ahead this time, but because I do think as a whole so far it's answered some of the things I had particular problems with within the 1st episode. The treatment of some of the characters gets explained better. I particularly love the idea of having the lioness in episode 4 explain that most of her life having to live up to male tradition and just carry on the traditions that men have imposed on her world. That really pisses her off. I love that we have this character calling that kind of crap out in this episode, because it's saying to you, this isn't the show you think it is from your opening moments. This is going to be something different. This is going to be something new. So I'm really glad that we have those moments, and having them actually appear on screen after the 4 episodes does kind of make the show better for me. So I'm really glad that we've done it this way.
Yeah. I think it was a good choice, but I'm right there with you in terms of I couldn't have done an episode by episode on this. I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much.
I did mention a little bit earlier on in the show, we've talked about many shows that get all episodes of their season dropped in one day to binge as much as fast or as slow as you want. And we've always kind of said, nobody's really nailed the method of doing that, why they're doing it. Why are you putting out an entire series of a show, 10 episodes long in a day or 20 episodes long in a day? Why aren't you doing a movie a week or whatever way you do it? I think this show is saying to you, watch it all and then make your decision. And by having all the episodes available, then that allows you to do that. So I think this has nailed something that a lot of shows haven't been able to do in the past. Why would I watch this show? Well, it's a massive world. You need to know all this information, but we can't just do an information dump at the start of episode 1. So watch all 8 episodes and then you'll know much more about the world. And if you like it, then we have a season 2 coming on its way. So
excellent. So there you have it. Those were our thoughts on the first 4 episodes of The Witcher. But if you want to send us your thoughts for the second half or the season as a whole, you can send us your thoughts at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or join us on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries, where we will put up a secondary part 2 spoiler post. We put one up for part 1 and we've gotten some amazing feedback so far. So thank you for that. We're going to go through it in one more second. But before we do, don't forget that you also can send your voice through the interwebs, through the magic that is the internet, through podcast recording clips, if you want to call it magic. So you can head over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com and record up to 90 seconds of your thoughts, and we'll put it in part 2 of our recording of The Witcher. Or you can just email it to us, so you can record a clip of yourself on your phone or your laptop and send it to us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. Mm-hmm. So, gentlemen, I think it's about time we jump over to Facebook and see what some of our fellow Witchers thought about this episode, or these episodes, I should say.
Yeah, our first piece of feedback came from Richard Blaze. Just says, okay, daft question. Do I need to have played the game before watching this show? I don't think so. I don't think it's necessary. In fact, I don't think the characters play out exactly the same way in the game as they play out in the show. So I don't know whether it will add a huge amount, just that it's the same fantasy world, right, Chris? What would you think?
Yeah, no. So I did actually respond to Rich on this, and I did say, no, I don't think so. You'll have a better understanding of some of the parts or some of the lore, things like that. But no, I think this is a separate piece. Now, Lauren, the showrunner, has come out and said this is based on the books. It's not based on the game, because the game is an adaptation of the books. So her view was to base it back completely on the books because she didn't want to be an adaptation of the books. So no, I think if you want to and you've watched the whole thing, go ahead, enjoy it. Like, the game is fantastic, and I will repeatedly say that. No, you do not have to have played the game to watch this.
Mm-hmm. And I think, in fairness, it would be a massive uphill struggle if you made a television show that could only be played by people who played 3 games. I think 3 of them are on 2 different systems as well. I don't think you can get all 3 games on the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox. So it would be almost impossible to say you have to have played all 3 games to want to watch this show. And also, most people don't make TV shows for only people who've read every single word of every book as well. So while it might allow you to understand some bits of the universe, hopefully the show will give us enough in the show itself for us. So I think that's what it's been accomplishing by episode 4 at least.
Yes. We then had a piece of feedback from Robert Phillips, Dr. Bob, who, when I put up a small gift to say, toss a coin to your Witcher, he went, oh, Chris, maybe this is your chance to sing again on the podcast with Patreon instead of plenty. And I did. I fulfilled that promise because, I can't even do it. I'm like, I have the vocal cadence and chops of a bird being strangled by I don't know what.
Yes, it reminded me of episode 3 with the Striga and Yennefer.
Exactly. That is, I am a Striga.
It kind of reminded me of the Bard in episode 2, to be honest. But anyway, Amy Fitzgerald-Jura says, so far, not a fan of this series, but if you guys feel it's good enough to discuss, I'm all in. I was thinking of reading the books first, but screw it.
Excellent, Amy. Yes.
Thanks so much, Amy. That's really nice of you to follow along with us. If you don't like the show, I promise we're only doing this in 2 episodes, so you can skip these 2 episodes of the podcast. But thanks so much for taking it on board and watching it because we said we were going to watch it. That's very nice of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Robert Phillips on episode 1 goes, overall, enjoyed the expanse of the story laid out without many answers and lots of hints as to what might be coming next. I like the way they played with some fantasy tropes, the mysterious murmuring, if wizardry, the tavern and the stranger, but not struck on the misogyny that felt it was underlying the whole thing. Interesting. Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I certainly do think that this world is in a world where the society is misogynistic. Absolutely.
Without a doubt, yeah.
And I think certainly in episode 1, I think, there's not an awful lot explained there, but I think elements of that do become further teased out. And I certainly think that women generally in this world of The Witcher, are in a fight, for those things.
It's one of the things in episode 1 that we didn't really discuss in terms of the mage having this prophecy that a woman is going to be coming to kill him. He seems to use that as a method of killing any woman that's anywhere near him. So that does kind of come across as misogynistic, but maybe the character is just misogynistic. You can absolutely have that in the show as well. I thought that was quite interesting that he is being allowed to just say, oh yeah, she was born under a certain sign, therefore she gets killed and slaughtered. I thought Renfrey was one of the most interesting characters in the show. It was a real shame when she was gone in the first episode. I thought she was a really good, challenging character to have beside Geralt. I'd love to have seen them maybe adventure together in the future, potentially. I think Geralt also would have liked to have been adventuring with her in the future too.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was an interesting little peek into a potential relationship there of The Witcher and Renfrey. Robert continues with, I also wasn't overly keen on the obsession in episode 1 with mutation and failure or evilness or being outcasted. There's enough discrimination through difference in the world without making it there in fantasy. Absolutely. I think in many respects, though, I do think it's fantasy. It is born from the reality, unfortunately. If you think of Tolkien and the First World War, or industrialization, that's what his starting point from his perspective was. I've not read the books. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know the author, but certainly, whilst fantasy is separate, a bit like sci-fi from maybe a normal fiction novel, normally the best ones do come from tackling themes that are happening in the present day and putting it in a new dimension through a different world of fantasy or science fiction.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is always known with fantasy is it starts with the tropes. I think I mentioned that earlier on. So it starts with those basic tropes, and hopefully we'll take them in a different direction as it goes on.
Yes, absolutely. I can't agree with what you said.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Bob, for your episode 1 feedback. Although I do believe you've got some episode 2 feedback as well. Yes, I might as well take that just to keep with the flow. Yes. Robert on episode 2 goes, the bard is quite an offset to the not so subtle theme of how disfigurement and disability are to be overcome. The mute boy and the girl with scoliosis and facial asymmetry, the servant with achondroplasia who gave up the boots, the withered hand, almost got me to stop watching. Only the pretty are heroic. But Geralt does allow us to see through this. He doesn't kill the goat man. He acknowledges the ethnic cleansing the elves have suffered. The rectoress turns the beauties into eels. Istred appears to fall for Yennefer. Maybe perfections are not all they are proposed to be. Still, do we really need another hunky white bloke to save the day for the unfortunate? Is he a saviour or an ally? Well, I think that's the... for me personally, a hunky white bloke, or just a hunky bloke, actually, like Henry Cavill, that's good to see. But certainly, yes. I mean, I think, I just don't know as such where or how this goes till the end of episode 8. So, I think Henry Cavill also is a bit of an outsider as well. I think, he is a special type of species in a world where humans also distrust him. So I don't, it's not someone as such who's coming from a place of privilege. He is eking his way through to build up coin, to have a living, despite most people effectively resenting him unless they need to use him to destroy a monster, in which case he has the perfect skill set. So I think, I'm not too sure he is that hunky white bloke of, say, I don't know, some other films or TV that come to save the day, even though he is a hunky white bloke in physical form.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the things that is interesting that John mentioned right at the beginning of the podcast, this whole story generally is told from the perspective of Geralt. What's interesting here is we have 3 main characters, 2 of them female, one in Ciri and one in Yennefer, both telling completely different stories, and those 2 characters are not being saved by Geralt. They're doing their own thing and not being saved by anybody else. They're moving through their stories under their own power. They're not being guided and not being saved constantly. So what they effectively have done with a female showrunner, it seems, is created a show around a cast of characters rather than it just being centered on this one person going through saving people effectively. So yeah.
The one thing I will say is very much that, but again, I'm slightly, I have the burden of external knowledge, but the character of Ciri and Yennefer and Triss and the books of The Witcher, the source material of the games, has always had a very strong female presence, a very strong female characters. So Yennefer herself is more than a match for Geralt. Geralt does not save for all time. It happens the other way. Ciri is the same. So there is very much a strong female power behind this. Yes, Geralt is the big, hulking, muscular Henry Cavill. But he is the knight, but he's not the knight in shining armor, if you understand what I mean. He's not the one who comes in to save the day.
Yeah.
He is the knight who saves villages, but not the damsel in distress.
Yeah, and it's also an adaptation. You couldn't really do the show without having Geralt at the centre of it.
Yeah. Yes, okay,
yes. An odd thing. Otherwise, you might as well create a brand new fantasy show, I suppose. We also got some feedback in from Phil Elliott, who says, great series, really enjoyed it, although the jumping back and forward in time is slightly confusing, but does add extra to the game series. Makes you want to play all the games again.
Excellent stuff. Well, we need to play the games.
We do. Zainab Aragbradur says, watch the whole series as well. I like the use of disorienting timelines and stories coming full circle and no one being fully good or fully evil.
Yeah, good stuff. I think these things slightly change around in the series as well. You know, you see him save the princess in episode 3. You see him stand up for Hedgehog Knight in episode 4. And of course, these are all playing out at different times. So I think it'll be interesting how the disorientating timelines and stories, maybe just how they do focus ultimately in the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I will quickly interlude at this point to say WitcherNetflix.com has just been sent to me. Essentially, I've been told what it is, so I'm not going into it. It is a map and timeline of the season 1.
Yeah.
So for those of you who have watched the full season, jump into it. It will explain everything, where everything is happening and when it is all happening. But for those who haven't, when we have watched the remaining 4 episodes, we will use that at the end when we're discussing, and we'll also see how we thought that came together.
It came in the other day after it's been out. Obviously, the show's been out for about 20, 30 days now. It came in the other day and I just closed my eyes instantly. All I saw was the headline and it spoiled something for me. So do not look at it if you have not seen the rest of the episodes. Continuing on with his discussion about the episodes, Robert Phillips says, episode 3, this one with its central themes of lack of choice over parenthood, or maybe motherhood in particular, also got me a bit cross. I was already a bit annoyed by the beauty myth that was being handled by the storyline, but then when it became an exchange between beauty and motherhood, I started to growl a bit. After these very frequently repeated myth of brother-sister incestuous rapes in a form of misunderstood romantic love, and it really took some effort to get to the end of this episode. I do hope the writers unpick some of these irritations. interesting perspective on the episode, Bob. I think I saw it the exact opposite way for a lot of the episodes in there. We've talked about it quite heavily throughout the show itself, that they are taking some of the major tropes, and I do think they are flipping on them quite a bit throughout the show, particularly as you mentioned, the beauty myth. I don't think it's a myth that people see a beautiful person walking in the room and they do tend to control things a lot. I like the idea that Yennefer as a character is taking that as a power for herself. That's quite
And cool. I don't think, the show is not saying that focusing purely on beauty is right. And I think in episode 4, you see the realization that what she had to do in episode 3 to become beautiful, to gain this position. And in the end, while she thought it was giving her power, she's ended up being a dog's body for the men because they are misogynistic. And that is inherent. And I suspect her view is that now the power that she must seek is for one of change beyond changing herself.
Exactly.
So it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Final bit of feedback comes from Rob Phillips as well, who had this to say about episode 4. Took me a bit of time to realize that time wasn't linear and initially quite confused, but there's a clearing of the dodgier parts from the beginning with the structural misogyny still strong, but many of the female characters refuting it in varied ways. One question still hangs with me though. Just how friendly would you have to be to let someone rub chamomile into your lovely bottom, do you think? Well, we've answered that question.
Yeah.
So we've discussed that one. And I think, as we've kind of said throughout this, by the end of episode 4, a lot of the tropes you are being refuted, and challenged in different ways.
Yeah.
I think, as Derek put it best, you need to start with some of these tropes and then work your way from there.
Yeah, I think the point is, this is the world the characters live in, and you want to see how they navigate that world and how they deal with the things that are going on in that world. Whatever those pressures and whatever those ideals are that are being upheld by other characters in there, what you want to see is the characters that you're following, and how they're dealing with them. So I think by the end of episode 4, we've now seen quite a significant amount of all of these characters, and hopefully over the rest of the show, we'll see some, payback potentially for some of the more gruesome things that have happened in this world that we've only heard spoken about, like the ethnic cleansing of the elves. Potentially we'll see the payback for that happening in the future. There's some intriguing things that I hope are going to play out as the show goes on, whether it be this season or next season. So, some really good stuff. But thanks so much for putting feedback in for each of the episodes, Bob. That's really
absolutely.
I know you usually follow along with us when we do our episode by episode discussions. So, it must have been intriguing for you to watch all 4 episodes over the course of a day and a half, after we announced it and send in your feedback. So thanks so much once again, Bob.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for sending in the feedback. And don't forget, we'll put up a post in the coming days with the part 2, the episodes 5, 6, 7, 8, for your feedback there. And we'd love to hear from everyone.
Yes, we'll be recording our second part of our Witcher podcast next week on the 19th of January. So make sure you get your feedback in by the 18th, and we'll hopefully be able to talk about it in the next episode, our final episode of The Witcher.
Yes, but then we have some interesting stuff coming up in 2020. Most importantly, for those Trekkies out there, we are going to be recording our podcast on Picard from the 25th of January. Yes, it'll be a weekly drop on CBS and Amazon Prime. So it's going to be an interesting. We're doing a weekly drop on that, and we look forward to you checking us out and following along with us there. But in order to do that, you must subscribe to all of the Nilfgaardian or, oh my god, I forgot the name, or Witcher. Yeah, you can be Nilfgaardian, you can be a Witcher, you can be an elf, whatever. Wherever you subscribe to your podcast, whatever type of affiliated podcast catcher you listen to or use, or you could just head over to tvpodcastindustries.com where we link to everything there. But you can also toss a coin to your Witcher, to your podcaster. Oh, Valio Patreon. Oh, Valio Patreon. Yes, and as a thank you for the Patreon, you'll be getting these Witcher episodes a couple of days early. And, of course, you'll be getting our ever thanks and our love. And just, we'll shout you out. You'll be helping us by keeping our podcast servers up. We love doing this. We love having you about. You can't afford to toss us $1, toss a coin to your podcast, that's okay, and we understand. So just sharing the podcast is also sharing the love.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us for this mega, massive, spoiler-filled episode of The Witcher Part 1. We'll be back with Witcher Part 2 next week. Really looking forward to seeing how this series plays out and the series plays off before going into space with Star Trek Picard. Have I said I'm going to see the premiere of that next week?
No, you haven't.
No, you haven't.
Yes. I'm flying over to the UK to see the premiere of Star Trek Picard in Leicester Square, where they do the premieres of like Star Wars and stuff. That's really exciting.
It'll be excellent stuff.
Yeah, get to see it about a week before it comes out on Amazon Prime and on CBS All Access in the US. So very excited to see what's going to be like. One of my favorite sci-fi characters of all time, really, Captain Picard. Doing the Picard maneuver right now as I adjust to my shirt.
Very good stuff.
Yes, looking forward to it. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again really soon.
Yeah, as always, fellow witchers, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And remember, keep witching, keep listening.
I like that.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
She sees the Cintran flags on the horizon and goes straight for them, and then she feels like she's going to be saved by them, effectively. But we find out that the Nilfgaard,
Nilfgaardians.
But we find out that the Nilfgaardians?
Yeah, that's Nilfgaardians.
To write it on every fucking page.